This is Who's Really the Boss, a podcast for accounting firm leaders who want to grow with intention and lead with purpose. I'm Rachel Dillon, and along with my husband, Marcus Dillon, we share real stories from our accounting firm, practical firm growth strategies, and the tools you need to lead your clients, your team, and your life well. Welcome back to another episode of Who's Really the Boss podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
I'm excited today to give an update on personal family life.
Yeah, lots of updates. I think we've shared some of those in passing. Just in previous conversations, we can give a more full picture of updates on, the girls, even maybe Cash, who a lot of people hear in the background as well. But yeah, definitely a lot to update as we jump into today's conversation.
We'll start with Cash, even though I don't know if he's my favorite, but he's definitely the closest in proximity currently. So Cash's update, Cash is our dog. He's 13. He has joined us in many episodes, uninvited, but because he has this lingering cough. And so he just spent some time in the dog ICU, and they diagnosed him officially with, they use them interchangeably, but chronic bronchitis or COPD. And so then he happened to get another infection of some sort, like respiratory infection. And so he spent a few days in oxygen and with IVs. So that was fun and exciting to have our dog in the ICU. But he is alive and well and here. So he may make an appearance with the cough every now and then on this episode as well.
Yeah. So if your dog ever comes across COPD or chronic bronchitis, let us know, because he was first diagnosed with a collapsed trachea. And then this last visit, they did a full x-ray. They were like, his trachea is fine, but like his lungs are not. And so something great to learn 2 years after the fact, after he was diagnosed with the collapsed trachea. But the, treatment for both things are the same. So he's on steroids, been on steroids since January of 2024. And so it's funny how that worked out.
All right. Who's next for an update?
You can give Avery's update. I think some people that know us follow along and know that she's coming off of her first college career swim season and just wrapped up Big 12. So if you want to give an update there.
Yes, we were so fortunate to be able to travel with her and watch the Big 12 championships in North Carolina. And she swam in 3 individual events. That's the max that you can swim or enter in, and then 2 relays. And so she ended up 3rd in her 500 freestyle, 6th in her 200 freestyle, and 11th in the mile. So she is definitely a distance freestyle swimmer. She was also part of the 800 free relay and the 400 free relay. And honestly, I don't remember where either one of those landed in total scoring. It wasn't in 1, 2, or 3, which is the only ones that they do medals and podium for in the relays. So, but she did a great job at both of those, and we loved being there to support her.
Yeah. It's kind of cool. She's a freshman, obviously a lot to build on, and was not feeling 100% kind of into the swim meet, if you will. So that mile is the last race on the last day for her. And it's just a lot of mental build up to that race. And then the fact that she wasn't feeling 100%, just a lot to, build upon for future seasons. And so she's had a few, days off. We'll have a few weeks off here. And not be in the pool necessarily. She joined us this morning for a workout at F45, which we've been doing together since the beginning of the new year. So it's kind of fun to see her more, that we're, proximity wise close enough to do stuff like that. And then she kind of sees us as a refuge. I think she sees our couch and our fridge as a refuge from college life, which is always nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And give an update on Kinley.
Yeah, so Kinley's living her best life as well. It's just a little bit different of a life. So she is all in on sorority life as far as like her Chi Omega friends at Baylor, and they're coming out of its musical season competition called Sing. It's kind of unique to Baylor, I would say. It's like Broadway, very, very well thought of in the Baylor and Waco communities. And so she's coming out of support season for friends that were a part of Sing and just being all in that. But yeah, we've gotten to see her more because we've been closer proximity wise as well. So she is actually, her spring break is coming up. By the time this drops, she will have already gone on spring break, but she's going to do a mission trip through her church there in Waco, Antioch, and they're going to go down to like the border. So Texas side of the Mexico border to, I guess do humanitarian work. I don't even know what she's doing. I don't know that she knows what she's doing.
She said that their mission trips are more evangelical in nature. So they really just go out and share the gospel. They don't have housing projects that they're working on. They don't have medical teams or medical projects that they're doing. Honestly, they are really just going there and talking to people all week long. So it will be interesting to hear more about what that's like when she gets back.
Yeah. And she doesn't speak Spanish, so we'll see how the whole thing goes. Usually you can get by. We do live in Texas, but the further you get south, it seems like the more prominent Spanish is. So, but yeah. And we've got a lot of questions because Collective has, our event Recharge coming up in Mexico. And, Mexico, before the Iran thing popped off, Mexico kind of got a little bit exciting as well, but Mexico is a big country. So even like Kinley going down to the Texas side of the Mexico border, she'll, be very secure and kind of taken care of, is what we know to be true. And the same on, our upcoming trip, our upcoming Collective event in Mexico at the end of April. I think Puerto Vallarta was where some of the stuff was going down, right? And then Cancun, where we're headed, or outside of Cancun, 1,300 miles away from that conflict, right?
Yes. Yeah. So Recharge 2026, that is for Collective by DBA members, for mostly partners or firm owners and key leaders of those firms will be taking a trip. So there is a group of about 40 of us that will be going at the end of April. We'll wrap up tax season and then head out for a little fun in the sun together and a little bit of CPE and learning. So that'll be a great time as well.
Yeah.
Kinley is also trying to, after her mission trip, she's trying to squeeze in a New York trip, like a New York weekend, before she heads off to Italy and France. And so I don't know where she's getting the funds to do this, but I did let her know that we will not be funding that little weekend trip that she asked about. So we'll see if that one happens, and we'll keep you guys updated on if she made the weekend happen. It actually happens to be like the day before, the weekend before finals start. And so the Monday is called Dead Day. And so that's why they are thinking that they should definitely take a trip to New York City. Why not? They have 3 whole days and clearly unlimited budgets. And so they just decided, her and her best friend decided that they should do that. So we'll see. We'll keep you updated.
Yeah. That'll be an interesting turn of events on that trip. So.
Yes. All right. We are coming up for Dillon Business Advisors, our accounting firm. We are coming up on 15 years of DBA. We are in season 5, so 5 years of the podcast. So with that, we definitely have listeners who haven't heard the origin story of DBA, but also probably a lot of things that we haven't shared, just because podcast episodes are short and 15 years is a long time. So wanted to recap what the first 15 years of DBA has been like.
Yeah, and I think 2026 is kind of that celebration year, right? When 2011 is obviously, if you do the math, when we started DBA, and that was done through acquisition. But 15 years ago, I was working in a firm as the W-2 employee. And probably about this time of year is whenever I kind of sat down and actually wrote letters, did a search fund, old school way to, connect with CPAs who may be on the edge of a succession event and connect with them to see if there was an opportunity to acquire their firm. I don't know why I always thought about acquisition as the way to start a firm. It just never occurred to me to just go out and do it from an organic lens. Maybe that's just my nature and the way that I'm wired to do it through acquisition and to build budget, which we'll talk about a little bit. Like the reason why we've done acquisitions in the past is to build budget. And that first one, it was to build budget for like our life, our lifestyle, to replace salary and do that in a way where it was a little bit more predictable than just leaving and hoping that organic growth solved the revenue problem. So, but yeah, it's been 15 years, and you and I have talked a lot about this. I think, at least in our world, and I've had conversations with other friends, it seems like there's a 5-year rhythm in business ownership, and we can definitely see that like a reinvention or an evolution every 5 years of DBA. So the first 5, what they look like, the second 5, and then that third 5, we could probably even talk to that a little bit and see what the challenges were and where we took it, experiments to a whole new level and what we learned. But definitely excited for the conversation. You and I discussed like this is going to be a 2-parter most likely because there's so much to unpack. And really what we hope to do here today is, speak about where we've been, kind of the experience that we've had and where we've built to today. And then on the second part, which will come out after, would be where we think the future's going, some of the conversations that we're having right now with other leaders and firms and just in the market in general. Just to give our prediction, what it looks like for our next 5 years, if you will, like I guess that's a 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. I guess it would be DBA 4.0 is what we're entering into or what we've entered into. So, but yeah, like happy to have this conversation today and excited about it.
Okay, I want to ask you first then, since we're going back to the beginning. You had a great job at a great firm. You had been in a couple of positions, and I mean, for all intents and purposes, you were a leader in that firm.
Yeah.
And so what was it that made you want to start DBA?
Yeah. And obviously we'll share numbers. Like that's our, we're pretty open and honest about that stuff. Obviously I probably won't share names, but if you go to my LinkedIn page, you could probably figure out who I worked for and go learn that stuff. So, coming out of EY, I was fortunate enough to let's back up first. Like most people may not know, like you and I have been together since high school. So we met in driver's ed 15 and 16 and have kind of been together ever since. So, went to college together, came out of college, immediately sat for the CPA exam. I interned at Ernst & Young, went to work at Ernst & Young, and then you went to teach. And within a few months of, being married, we became pregnant and had our first daughter, Kinley. And, at our 1-year anniversary, we had a 1.5 month old. Right. So, but yeah, that's part of what shaped our story. Just having a young family early on in life, early 20s, being willing to take chances, both as a family and as businesses. So that shaped some of the decisions that led up to even starting the firm in our 20s and going out and acquiring that. So after Ernst & Young was not conducive to family lifestyle, was traveling. That was at the beginning of Sarbanes-Oxley. I was on the audit side, had a family friend that worked in a smaller firm. That firm it did less than $2 million a year. It was probably 15 total employees. I went there to help start their audit side, which looking back now, like that was a horrible decision for that owner, taking a risk like that on a 20-something-year-old kid, 24, I think, or I don't even 23 probably at that time. So anyway, we probably even younger. That may have been 22. Who knows? Like, it's crazy to think that someone was willing to take a chance to start audit practice with a 22 or 23-year-old kid. But anyway, so worked in that firm for 6 years, and during that time, worked on both the audit side and then rolled over to the tax side about 3 years in, and got to learn both sides of how a small firm operates. I came from an entrepreneurial family. My dad owned a small business and knew that I likely wanted to own a business. And the fact that I was technically trained as an accountant, got to know the business side of that, both by working at that firm and having a mentor who owned a practice. Just, you take calculated risk, you run the numbers, and it made a lot of sense to go that path first. So that was the background that led me to that. At that firm, you mentioned like it was a good gig. I I think it was 45%. I was able to get paid 45% of my effective billings, including write-ups. So I learned really early on how to game the system, how to, price things to where it was acceptable to clients and it didn't seem out of the ordinary. So I had a lot of flexibility in ways that I can earn money. It was what I learned in my early 20s. And that's kind of the art that a lot of people may not know today, is how to price engagements, how to have communication with clients directly, depending on the firm that you're coming out of. But I had that experience. And because I was getting 45 cents of every dollar of my effective billings, it wasn't even probably a good deal for that owner of the firm. And I know that he changed the compensation system after me because I was very expensive. I mean, I think some years I had made in that firm up to $180,000. I never hit 200,000, but I was cranking through some work, and I was probably billing close to 400,000 a year, maybe a little bit over toward the end. And what happened in the market, I guess, if you will, is in 2008, the market kind of became soft. That kind of continued into 2010. And during that time, the ability for me to make as much effective billings work was not there in that firm. So it meant that I either had to go get that work for that firm, turn on the BD hat, go do that for a firm I had no ownership in, or think about doing that for myself. And so like that's where we were. I was doing about $400,000 a year inside this firm, bringing home 45 cents on the dollar as a W-2 employee, which is it's a great, like looking back, like that's awesome. Like, I think I didn't have to go find the work. I just did the work, all that fun stuff. But it wasn't always going to be that way. And I kind of saw that writing on the wall, especially my compensation went down before I went out because he was looking to grow. He's bringing in more people. He actually was about to acquire a firm. And there was just like a lot of unspoken things where he wanted to make me partner, but he never said that. He said that whenever I gave my notice, is like, hey, I had these plans for you. And honestly, that helped shape some of the conversations that we have today with team members around ownership and things like that. But, that's where we were in 2010, 2011. And 2011, that tax season was my last one at that firm. And I had written about 50 to 60 individual letters to CPAs to see, hey, if they'd be interested in selling their business, and attach my resume and in a business card. So I got phone calls from that. And ultimately one of those was the acquisition that launched DBA in 2011.
Yeah, that was really interesting. Some things that we were experiencing as a family with you working in that firm, because the compensation was good, if not great, I will say, from that position. But what we were experiencing was there were a lot of expectations for you to match and even exceed the owner's working hours and working times. So even if you wanted to go in early and then leave, 8 or 9 p.m. at night, that wasn't really acceptable if the owner was going to stay until 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. And it really didn't matter even what time you went in. You really didn't have much control over that. And so that didn't align well with a teacher's schedule who was getting off at like 4 p.m. and then wondering, right, as a new married couple, where's my husband and where's the dad? I didn't want to be a single mom. And so definitely had talked to you about that. I think maybe at both positions at EY and at that firm. And so those were definitely also reasons that we had to start thinking about, okay, what this is not what we want our entire future, our entire family and our life to look like of these kind of working hours. What can we do instead? Or how can we shape this a little bit differently?
Yeah. And we were making good money. You were teaching, and you had benefits as part of that. So the way that we also like calculated some risk, right, was we had moved from our first starter home, which was a 3-bed, 1-bath, small home, into what most would say like a very comfortable, great home that we had built and could raise the girls in, throughout their high school years. I think we already had like the pool and had newer vehicles. We got to the point where we were debt free except for the mortgage. And a lot of that was in preparation to just give us flexibility, where we could make some decisions from a business aspect. So that was the hard work that we did, leading up to that 2011 decision to actually buy a firm and go into business ownership that way.
Yeah. So let's talk about kind of the early days. What was the
Yeah.
main goal of the firm from the beginning?
A revenue goal or like just in theory goal? Yeah.
Yeah, in theory goal, not necessarily a number. You probably had a number and you probably didn't even share that with me because again, I was making a teacher salary, so those numbers wouldn't even compute. Like
Yeah.
they wouldn't even make sense to me that you could actually make that much money. Yeah. So what were your main goals for the firm starting out?
Yeah, I think, well, we did the acquisition through, a bank loan. And so I think we were able to finance 90% of the bank loan or 80% to the bank, 10% seller note. And I came, to closing with 10% cash. And that initial acquisition was a $400,000 block or book from a retiring CPA who was, I think Bob was in his 70s, maybe 80s, but had a health scare, had the firm on the market with a broker, then took it back, worked through some things, and then got my letter and reached out. So that was what we started with. We had no intention, and I had signed non-compete, non-solicitation with the firm that I was leaving, of clients following us, but they followed me, and it's great. And so I had to pay out some collections to my former partner owner for about 3 years, and it was a third of what we collected. And I signed that as a 22 or 23-year-old kid when I started at that firm, and I held true to it, even though some people say you could fight it, it's 1 year, blah blah blah. We just did it, and it was just, hey, if I would have banked on a lot of those clients following me, it may have looked a little bit different on the firm that we acquired. And I may have just decided to go out on my own and, do that as my acquisition, but that wasn't what we were planning on. So very quickly, with those clients following, we went from a $400,000, potential all the way up to, I think we ended maybe 700,000 pretty quick. So it was significant. I would say $150,000 to $200,000 of work that followed, and then just good organic growth from being the new person in town that had a lot of capacity and availability, the thought of a lot of availability, and that was the goal. So it was off to the races. That $400,000 amount. The thing that was exciting about that was I was doing about that much work at the other firm. And so I knew that I could, if everything else, nobody else was there to help me at that time, is how I thought about it, I could get that amount of work done on my own. And that $400,000 included audit work. It included some like some crazy audit work that should have never been done. It was like 401k audits, which are awful. And so I think those are some of the pieces looking back. Like, we retained the audit practice all the way through 2020, which we'll talk about too. But yeah, just, that's where we started. It allowed us to bring over a friend to kind of help with that audit side, and do some consulting there with a couple of clients. It allowed us to, we didn't keep any of the team members from that previous CPA after the first tax season. We had inherited a office manager who just wasn't the best fit for where we were going. And once we got to the point, we were able to hire a church friend to kind of sit in that seat. I think she was the first office manager. No CPA experience, no nothing like that. And then as far as other team members, I think we just kind of operated and scrapped by with whoever we could find. So it wasn't like we did, hiring out of the gate. I think we tried to outsource some of the bookkeeping and payroll to others, and regretted that down the road, because we tried to pull it back after we said, hey, this CAS model makes a whole lot more sense than just doing tax and audit. But we were just trying to look for ways to leverage ourselves. And so, yeah, it was kind of top heavy for maybe the first 2 years, I would say. But after we started to lean into what a team could look like, that's whenever we started to really experiment with what roles would look like. And the other piece of this is, hey, I was at a brick and mortar CPA firm going into an office in Houston, Texas, which was about 45 miles from our house. It was hour plus commute both ways. And we went and bought a brick and mortar firm. Like, working from home wasn't an option at that time in my mind. It probably was an option technology wise, but in my mind, I was going to an office every day by myself pretty much, and working till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Our first office, we inherited the lease from the previous CPA. It was not somewhere we would pick. It was right off of a major highway, major interstate in Texas, right outside of Houston. And it was probably a Class D building, if I had to guess, because it had the old school atrium, where whenever they bring mulch and plants into that atrium, it just smells like crap, right? Like literally. So that's what we were working with. And the clients who we bought were used to that. So we try to make it really easy on them as much as we could. And we had some crazy neighbors in that building, both in the building and then like the buildings beside us. So those are I remember working till 9 and 10 o'clock at night, being the only car in the parking lot, only person in the office. And I owned that business. And now looking back, there's just so many different ways to do that. Like, grab your stuff, go home, work from your home office if you're going to do that. So.
Yeah, that's great. Sounds like your main priority was with starting the business was earning potential. Mine was definitely work-life balance, but the initial years definitely didn't allow for the work-life balance piece. So the good news was we were working for our family, clients and the couple of team members that we had, but mostly building for our family and for our future. But the hours, they weren't really that much better. And your dad and myself got roped into volunteering our time on nights, weekends, holidays to help with tax season as well.
Yeah. And that's where I would say, you came to work in the practice in 2013. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was a couple of years in where we felt really comfortable to where, the teacher salary and benefits, we had more than made up for my salary and your salary and all that fun stuff. And we could talk through what that looked like. So that was just within a couple of years. That wasn't even the 5-year kind of cycle that we mentioned earlier. The other thing that business ownership allows you to do is it allows you to do other investments. Real estate is a very big part of our story. So we always knew we wanted to own an office building, because if we're going to pay rent, which in our mind, a CPA firm always had to have an office building, always had to pay rent to somebody. And what we learned from our best clients was, if you're going to pay rent, might as well pay it to yourself. So in 2012 and then in 2013, we moved in. We actually bought and built our first office building. It wasn't a crazy dollar amount. It was less than our house cost, for a 2,500 square foot office building that was standalone. And, just like you would take out a mortgage, we did all that, built it, and then moved into that office building in 2013. And so we were only in that first office for a couple of years and, happy to leave the mulch and the plants, the interior plants behind. But I think that's where, if you look back and see where people like congratulate you for success, they congratulate you at when you started the firm or when you bought the business. And they also, like, anytime something big, like a real estate, moves, whether it's a new office, a purchased office, whatever. And, looking back, it's like, oh man, every time someone wished me success, it was because I had just gone into debt, and just had taken out a lot of debt and a lot of risk on our part. And then you've got people that just, hey, congratulations, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Fun fact, my first day was the day we were moving out of the not so great building into our brand new, very own standalone space where we would not have people coming in off of the highway to use the restroom as if it were a public building
Yeah.
and a public restroom. So that was great. I remember doing a couple of collection calls on the floor as we were packing up and moving that office out on my first day. But I'm pretty sure that is why that new different building, different space had to happen, because I was not coming to work with you in the other place on a regular basis.
Yeah. So I would say, even though we were able to do that, replace your salary, that first 5 years of DBA, the acquisition or acquisitions, because if we count the clients that followed, and then I absorbed a small book from a friend as well. So like those acquisitions, like that was what happened the first 5 years. That first 5 years was all about just build and stability, as far as like replacing the salaries, making sure that we could, live comfortably, pay our bills that we had up until that point. And, coming out of that first 5 year cycle, 1.0, if you will, we were in our newer office building, it would have been 2016, and things were moving. We were hiring people. We were outgrowing that space because the office building we built was it 1,500 down and 800 up? It was smaller. So we were doubling up and tripling up people within that office building, because as we grew, as we passed that $1 million mark in that first 5 years, the West Houston, Katy area was just very good to us. And we were hungry and willing to do a lot of different projects. We had a lot of different services that we were offering. We were in the community. We were just saying yes to a lot of different things. And that's what fueled that initial growth to really 2016. And so when I look back over the 15 years, I also look back at the offices that I was in. I look at the people that were around me, if you will, and just thankful for it all. But that first 5 years was truly about just stability, building something, being able to pay both our personal and our business debts, at that point, because we took out a loan. First Command Bank gave us a $360,000 or $320,000. I don't even know the number anymore, because if it was 320 there, 40,000 former owner, and 40,000 down payment, it would have been about 320, which just seemed like such a big number back then. So we had a partner in the bank, and we were able to pay that off within that first 5 years, I think is what, we were really hoping to achieve. So that's where we're at. We were brought into 2016. So that first chapter, just all about stability, all about building the base. And we did that by saying yes to everything.
Yeah. Do you remember team size and revenue size at that point by 2015, 2016?
Yeah, I would say 2016, I think we were at 1.5, 1.6, very successful, very high margin, single owner firm, right? Life was good. I think we, personally bought a lake house. I mean, we were doing some different things, there as well. So I think it was good. And, the girls when we started the business, the girls were ages 5 and 3. And then, that that would have been 10 and 8, right? If I can do the math, to where that's about when we decided, hey, this is what we want our lives to look like. So we were busy in the business, and then we were also busy at home, and just made some decisions to how we wanted to raise the girls and what different activities we wanted them to partake in and have time like on the water as a family. So that's where we dedicated time and dedicated budget.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, so that first 5 years, I think you hit the nail on the head with was building and what that looked like. It required a lot of hours from the both of us, which left our kids kind of coming to the office with us a lot
Yep.
or spending time with, thankfully, we had family close by and friends close by, helping to kind of watch them while we were working. And so there was definitely an inflection point there when, we got to summertime. School time was fine, but summertime was really difficult because the girls did not want to spend every day of their summer at the office with us. And so we could get them there for a few half days, a couple of days a week. But other than that, we had to figure out, okay, what are they going to do? And it wasn't I didn't prefer for them to go into like a daycare type setting. And so definitely had to make some decisions on we can't leave them at home yet. They're not old enough to stay home by themselves yet. And we can't ask for favors every day. So we really had to look at what does the business look like going forward, and how do we continue to grow and serve all of the clients that we have, but not working the same amount that we were back then.
Yeah. And I'll also say at the end of that time period, 2016, we didn't work from home, even, really in the after hours. Like, I don't think that was really, I remember some of those nights where we did work from home, but it wasn't that first 5 years. We were definitely like, hey, the work is at the office. You have to go to the office to do the work. And something that, we'll touch on is the way that we were successful is because we put the hours in. Like that we weren't necessarily working smarter. We were just working more than others around us and saying yes to others around us, which doesn't work anymore. And we'll talk about that. So, but that was 2016. I would say that next 5 years, that next chapter, 2.0, I mentioned my mentor, Tom. So in 2016, I had breakfast with him, and he was already starting like his succession plan. He had sold off a few blocks of clients, kind of got down to this manageable size where he was running it on his own. He had a few key team members that he loved and cared for that were still with him. And, just kind of was coming up on this decision of what to do, and very open and transparent with one another, value him quite a bit. And we came away from that breakfast, and I just said, hey, how would we be worse off by coming together? And just if we can not be worse off, then we should just do it. And that should not be the way that you approach an acquisition or a merger. How can we be worse off? But that's what we did in 2016, or what I did. So at that time, we acquired his practice at the end of 2016, and that led us down, this next chapter, if you will. So with that, I thought, it'd be great to have him, physically close and being able to tap into his knowledge base, and the team members that we're getting, they'll be great. And what we learned is just, it was two different cultures, not right or wrong, but just different. And so the way that they valued things, they maintained their office presence, which was about 20 to 30 minutes away, depending on traffic. It was different, and we didn't really think through that all the best. But, after that 2017 tax season, where it was 2016 returns, we were still operating out of the office that we were in, kind of balancing out the two different locations. We also decided as partners, we would build a new 12,000 square foot office space to kind of be the marquee office space that we would never have to leave and move out of over the lifetime of the firm. And so that started in 2016 and was finished in 2017. but we looked up, and some personal stuff was happening as well. Just girls were getting older, things were shaping up to where we looked up and we had over 2,000 annual clients that thought we intimately knew every detail of their lives, and that we were their CPA, right? And we should be able to answer every question that they have at the drop of a hat on a phone call. And we were doing about a little over 2 million. I think we hit the 2 million mark after we acquired his firm in 2017. But yeah, it was nonstop. And I remember that first season we were in the old office building before we moved into the new office, like just stacks of these folders that had routing sheets, and occasionally they had client documents in them. I just remember being like stacks of piles around my office, around my desk, and like they were in my office just because I had to invoice them. Like that was the final step. And that was like, I love sending invoices out because like what that leads to is cash in the bank. And so whenever these would stack in my office, and I would have dozens, right? Maybe even like approaching 100. And the way that we were trying to incentivize team to get work moving throughout the business, like we were throwing hundreds around at the drop of a hat, like setting goals and cash incentives. It was definitely a fun time for a few, but it was like, I can't imagine running that hard right now. How we've thought about things differently.
Yeah, I think something different. So those folders came in, but it was really our goal. They would come to me first to send out the return for review and signature, get filed, and then go back to you for billing or for invoicing. And it was really our goal to get those out like same day, right? So when they hit our office, then they also needed to get invoiced that same day, or depending on how late, maybe the next day. And so that was never something that I experienced. I've only worked with you in this accounting firm. I have never worked in another accounting firm. But something that seems common practice among a lot of CPAs is to hold invoicing for a while, probably because of the volume of work that's around. That's just like you can't get to that if you also are trying to get client work out. But that was something that was always priority for you to get done immediately. And I think that that has been a huge part of our success, that we've just never done it differently. We've never
Yeah.
known to do it differently. But definitely something very common that I hear, that people are spending days doing billing and doing invoicing and things, like sometimes months after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of that, going back to that firm that I was a part of, like where I got paid based off my, effective utilization, that's why I would send out invoice. Like that carried with me throughout my whole career, even to today. Like, let's get this invoice out, let's get paid. And I've never known any different. So whenever someone says they just haven't invoiced out, or you're dealing with an attorney who sends you an invoice 3 or 4 months after the fact, you just shake your head. And I've also used, that guidance with clients. Like if you're having cash flow issues, like let's bill some stuff out. It's that easy, right? And let's go get paid. And how quickly can we get paid? Can we get a retainer? All that fun stuff. So, but that carried with me. And so in 2017, we looked up, and we had already been introduced. We were already working with Amy McCarty, our coach, who's now our director of operations. We did that kickoff with like a technology. We moved from CERT to UltraTax and implemented Practice CS within the firm in 2015, 2016. And so that's whenever we were introduced to Amy. And, so there were some different things that we were trying. 2017, we also really leaned into monthly recurring revenue. We started offering CAS for the first time. It wasn't called that, but it was, all bundled services where we were thinking about, hey, we've got too many tax clients. Let's try to get all these tax clients into these monthly services. It sounds so easy, and let's just go sell this to all these clients and we'll be getting paid. And if you've ever done that, it's not easy, because you're already probably serving those clients well. and they're not going to pay you more just because that makes your life easier. They are, concerned about themselves, as we all are, right? So, but yeah, we leaned into that. So after we started getting some traction with that into 2017, we did look up and we said, hey, what we've created here with two close office locations, a variety of different clients. We love Tom. Tom's clients love Tom. Tom's clients hated us, right? And so we were just too modern for what they were. And we were just trying to move too fast looking back.
Yeah, and I think also like this is something that anyone can hear now and take with them, and just think about as they're doing acquisitions. If you talk to a firm who has done client block exits, the list that they have is a great list of clients. It's very successful people and probably very successful businesses that they're serving. But if it has been pared down that much, likely it is due to the relationship that they have with someone in the firm. So for the acquisition that we did with Tom, the relationship was directly with Tom. They had been with him for years. They had made it through 3 or 4 cuts of clients. So that should have been our first kind of red flag that this might not be the easiest transition for them to just love a new CPA. Also, what Tom had done is make his capacity and his availability just that much more for his clients because he had pared down his list so far to where he could do a client meeting with every single client ahead of preparing their return, and then probably on the back end of presenting their return to them for review. And so that was not the way that Dillon Business Advisors was operating at that time. So that was also very different, that we weren't used to 2 scheduled meetings during tax season with every client, even though most of them were annual only projects. So that was something really difficult, is that we weren't necessarily serving them in the exact same way that they had been served before, and we definitely weren't the person who had been serving them before. So those were 2 really hard barriers to try to overcome.
Yeah. So just for context, like Tom brought over a little bit more than $400,000 of work with him whenever he came, and we acquired that. It wasn't a merger. It wasn't, anything like that. We acquired it. After we learned, like Tom also, he wanted to pursue an interest, like a very niche specialty within accounting. It's receivership work, and he does that. He enjoys it. We did not enjoy it, and you're dealing with courts and attorneys and fun stuff like that. So it wasn't part of our goal. So he pursued that beginning in 2017 to go down that path. And we had to make the decision on the office, the couple of team members, those clients, and the first, I would say, like spinoff, if you will, is we just got rid of 2 blocks of clients. We retained the office, and with that, we had a friend who was starting a firm, and she said, "Hey, I'm not as busy as I would like to be," and so she made that mistake of telling us that, and we said, "Hey, do we have a deal for you?" So I think our initial client block sale to Julie was about 100,000. We did another client block sale that same year to another CPA closer to Tom's office, just to see if that would alleviate the pain of where we were coming from. So we spun off about $200,000, monetized that. But the very next year, it's still like we still had a lot of those same issues. We had more pain points than we wanted. And so that was when the second year of coming together, we really decided, hey, we're going to spin off the office. We found somebody who wanted to open up a firm in that location. He was working for a larger firm. So we actually took about $250,000 of work and monetized that with that office location. And so with all of that, like we continue to grow. We never dipped back below 2 million. So I think we were like 217. We sold off about 200,000. We still kind of continue to grow organically, did price increases. fewer clients, but more revenue. And then we spun off that office of 250, and still it didn't take us below that $2 million mark the next year. So we were continuing to do organic growth, the cash flow from monetizing those. It was a variety of different ways that we would do that, whether it was retention based, hey, go collect whatever you can year one, and then pay us, based on a 3-year note after that first year. So we were giving away that whole first year of collections to that CPA. And it was a no-brainer. If you were going to go start and you had full selection of who you could retain or fire, it wasn't a bad deal. So that's why it's been successful when we've offered that. The 250,000, that was a little bit different. That person actually went out and got a loan. We got that very similar to when I acquired the business. And with that purchase, it allowed us to really retire Tom, and he pursued receivership full time. We no longer had that office space. And I would say that was really 2018 was when that was all shuffling out. 2019 was just a very solid, stable year, if I remember correctly. Like, I think we were still coming into the office quite a bit. We had a great team. We were really leaning into MRR and CAS engagements. We were employing a lot of part-time working parents that would, come to the office at 9:30 and then leave at 2 or 2:30. I think you were one of those, right? And that was kind of your rhythm. But it was to allow people to drop their kids off, put their kids on the bus, get home in time to get their kids off the bus, get things ready to kind of bookend the kid's day. And even thinking back, like, all the work was done in that physical office building. Like, nobody took work home with them. It was all just done there. So that was a really good boundary, if you will, for those working parents that saw that as a good way to get back to their family.
Yeah, I think some things that helped with that was we had really defined what are these CAS services that we offer, who are these ideal clients that we serve, and if a prospect did not fit both of those things, we told them no. So during that time, we actually said no to a lot of potential growth and potential clients that we could have served. But I think that is really what allowed us to figure out what is this work life, workload, consistent balance throughout the year. Tax season during that time was still very heavy. We still had a high volume of annual tax returns that needed to get done, but we stopped allowing them to come in the front door. So there were a lot less fires to put out. There were a lot less, random, like, oh, I'm behind. I need to catch up because we've just accepted all of these new clients and we're trying to onboard and prepare returns in such a short amount of time. But also during that time, you had capability before most of us to remote in and work remotely if needed. So that was more of an as needed basis, just like you could do it. It wasn't efficient, but if you needed to work from somewhere else, you could. By 2019, I think we all had capabilities if we had to, because there were so many working parents, because we have always been a family first, people first organization. People had the opportunity, if kids had a random day off of school or had a sick day, but the parents still wanted to work or get things done, then they could essentially work from home or wherever they were. Again, it wasn't an efficient situation, but it did work. They were able to get some things done, or at least kind of prioritize and hit the high priority items until they were able to return back the next day.
Yeah. And I know we're coming up on time. So I think what we should do is let's finish 2.0, and then, we'll pick back up 3.0, and then, look ahead to 4.0 in the next conversation. So the end of 2.0 is just what you said. Like, we still had a server in the closet in this beautiful 12,000 square foot building that we built in Katy, Texas. We built out 7,000 square feet as our office space and had 5,000 of available shell space for someone to come along and, pay us as a landlord. And it was beautiful. Like I think the, wood wainscot, attorney feel, leather bound books, anchor man, if you will. feel to this office building, and you really enjoyed going there. But in 2019, I had this corner office in the bottom of the building, and I would just hide out there. Like I think I scheduled to walk around the building when I first got there and tell everyone hello, make small talk, but then I would just retreat, hide in that office, and pray nobody came and bothered me. Or brought their problems to me. And that's kind of how I lived day to day. And it was in office Monday through Friday. As you mentioned, the rest of the team was kind of there in and out as well, whether they were full-time, worked only a few days a week, or part-time most days a week. So, but the end of the 2.0 was really COVID. So in 2020, we kicked off the year as we do now as well with a team retreat. So we would bring the team together, set aside a day, not do any client work, but just really think through, hey, where's the year going? And I think 2020, it probably had some great like vision related theme to it, because 2020 vision and everything like that. But I remember in January, the person who helped us start the firm and that was leading the audit practice, which wasn't growing, it was just stable and maybe minimizing a little bit. The question that we asked at that retreat was, if you could do anything in this life, what was it? If you can do anything in this life and not fail, what would you do? And her response was, I would be a stay-at-home mom. And at that point, when you have a leader in the firm respond that way, it's like, okay, this is likely not going to be the person to help lead that aspect of the business into that next chapter. And so as leaders, you and I at that point were primarily the decision makers. We had to think through what was all possible. So that kicked off 2020. It was the plan. We would give her some consulting work for one of our major clients that she was already doing. She would wrap up the audit season, and then she would just be able to work on her own for that client, and then also for us if needed, but essentially set up her own firm. And that was all decided, in kind of January or February after that retreat. We were starting to communicate that to the team in person. And then we knew that we had to start having a plan in place for this audit practice. Were we going to grow it? Were we going to exit that line of work? And it was pretty much, on both of our hearts, to not pursue audit any longer. So we started having light conversations around what that would look like. And we identified a firm who would be interested in that. So all of those conversations were happening throughout tax season. And then spring break, March of 2020, everybody knows what happened with COVID. So this beautiful office building that people came to, everybody already had laptops. They took their laptops home. We kind of said, hey, we don't know how this is going to shake out. We were kind of joking. I remember doing some weird, posts or videos around putting documents in the freezer, because that apparently was supposed to help minimize the risk of COVID transferring. But we sent people home. They got comfortable. Their kids got sent home. And then they just never came back. Like, they learned how to work remotely. That existing team that we had learned how to finally work remotely because they had to. And we encouraged them not to set up shop at their kitchen table, if at all possible. We funded office, kind of accommodations, and they could still come to the office if they wanted to, but no one did. And I would say that was a huge shift in our business to essentially build to where we're at today and how we operate. So that happened. We also were finally kind of settled on who would take the audit and the test practice, and we spun that off after COVID during 2020 as well, and then actually backfilled a lot of our office space with that firm that bought the audit practice. So that's the end of 2.0. I know you probably have some questions or want to clarify some things about decisions that were made at that time.
Yeah. I remind me, but there was definitely, I will say during the 2.0, there was definitely a revenue mark that you wanted to hit and then never dip below. And I think originally, I think the thought was like, I wonder if I can run $1 million business. I wonder if I can build $1 million business. But when you exceeded that so quickly, then that watermark moved very quickly. to 2 million.
Oh yeah. It's
Yeah.
always more.
I'm all to 2 million.
Yeah.
And then it was, but it can never dip below. So even with the blocking, exiting and monetizing clients, that was really the thought behind that, was we never wanted to dip below that 2 million. So when thinking about what are those sizes and how quickly are we filling that with organic growth on the other side,
Yeah.
that was definitely a consideration and something that you continue to watch very closely. And so I think that definitely kind of highlighted the ability to work remotely. Should have allowed us what people would think work-life balance, but what that did, it really just allowed us to work more. We could just now work from the office.
Yeah.
Sometimes we said deal with the kids, but do the kids like routine of dinner, activities, bath, and bedtime, and then we would just go straight back to work again for the next 3 or 4 hours during busy season. And so definitely 2.0 still looked a lot like 1.0 for us from a workload and how many hours we were actually working in the firm. But we were able to accommodate a little bit better the girls' schedules and activities, because as they got older, they only got busier.
Yeah. I would say, to your point, we looked at top line revenue, but also, I think 2020 was the first year we always wanted to hold our margins because we were successful. Like, we priced right. We were able to get great engagements. We always wanted to hold our margins before officer comp 40 to 45%. So we were shooting high. And if you remember where I came from, 45% was what I was getting paid at that other firm to do that type of work. So I was like, well, that's the number I should hit in my mind, right? So that was kind of always the metric for me. And I remember 2020, $1 million to the bottom line and all that fun stuff that comes along with that. Celebrating that during COVID was a weird thing, because we took a trip to Atlantis, the Bahamas, during COVID. And it wasn't the best Bahamas experience by any means, but we did it, right? And I think that was kind of the end of 2020 and the end of 2.0.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Funny enough, I just was having a conversation with someone about that trip today before we were recording. So, yeah, that's a story for another time. But definitely 2.0 was good to us. I think we had to really define what we did and who we are and who we did it for, and then be very disciplined on who we accepted into the firm, both team members and clients.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sticking with us for the origin story and the maturity of DBA. And I think, Rachel, on the next one, we'll pick up 3.0 and then lean into 4.0 a little bit as well.
That sounds good. All right. See you on the next. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the conversation and want to learn more, be sure to visit collective.cpa. You can schedule a meeting directly with me, Rachel, by clicking on the Contact Us page. Be sure to subscribe, like, and share so you don't miss any future episodes. We look forward to connecting with you soon.